Hello, everyone. Today, Danielle Colby breaks her silence on Fritz and addresses the rumors about his exit from American Pickers. Let's hear her reveal the truth about Mike and Frank's relationship and uncover the real reason behind Frank's departure. Danielle Colby has finally spoken out about Fritz, putting an end to the long-running rumors. She shares the truth about the friendship between Mike and Frank, as well as the real reason behind Frank's departure from American Pickers. If you're curious about the real reason behind Fritz's departure and his relationship with Mike, leave a comment with a 1 if you agree with Danielle, or a 0 if you see things differently. Don't forget to like and share so your friends can stay updated on this story too. Let's dive in. At first, Danielle Colby wasn't a TV star. When American Pickers kicked off in 2010, she was simply a friend helping out Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz. While Mike and Frank traveled the country, searching through old barns for treasures, Danielle stayed in Iowa running Antique Archaeology, the shop where they sold their finds. She answered calls, tracked leads, and ensured everything ran smoothly. Fans quickly warmed to her due to her tattoos, vibrant energy, and down-to-earth nature, but Danielle was never just about her looks. She was the backbone that kept everything running smoothly while Mike and Frank were the driving forces behind the show's success. Growing up in Iowa, they had been longtime friends with a shared passion for antiques, and Danielle saw firsthand how well they clicked. Mike was the dreamer, always talking about preserving history, while Frank was more reserved, focusing on the finer details, like the mechanics of an old toy. They'd sometimes clash. Mike was all for the big signs, while Frank would be more intrigued by a motorcycle part. But it was always fun to watch. Danielle would laugh when they'd call her from the road, playfully arguing about who had the better find of the day. Even though she wasn't out in the van, she loved being part of the team. In the early days, everything was simple. They'd drive around in their white van, digging through people's belongings in search of hidden gems. Danielle made sure the shop was ready for whatever they brought back. She'd listen to stories about their trips, whether it was finding an old bike or a vintage sign, and help them figure out what to do with each find. People started visiting the shop to meet her, asking about Mike and Frank. It was exciting, but Danielle knew things wouldn't stay that easy forever. As the show grew, so did the challenges. She understood Mike and Frank well. Mike was always charging ahead with big ideas, while Frank preferred to slow down and focus on the details. Danielle found herself in the middle, mediating between Mike's ambitious plans and checking in on Frank when he seemed worn out. They trusted her, and she trusted them. It felt like a small family, but even then, Danielle noticed the subtle signs of tension. Frank would get quiet, and Mike seemed to push a little too hard. Nothing major yet, just early indications of what might come. American Pickers aired, and it didn't take long for the show to take off, and Danielle Colby was right there from the start. It all began slowly, with Mike tirelessly pitching the idea for years, filming with a shaky camera, dragging Frank along, climbing into old barns, and getting their hands dirty. Danielle supported them from the shop, helping to find leads. Networks rejected the concept time and time again, convinced that no one would watch two guys rummaging through junk, but Mike never gave up. Finally, in 2010, the History Channel decided to give it a shot, and it paid off. 3.1 million viewers tuned in for the first episode. Danielle couldn't believe her eyes. The shop was instantly swarmed the very next day as fans flooded in to see where the magic happened. Suddenly, Danielle became a recognizable figure, with people spotting her on TV and asking for photos. She'd smile, give them a tour, and highlight cool finds, like an old gas pump Mike had discovered. It was exciting but also overwhelming, and she had to hire extra staff just to keep up with the demand. The phone never stopped ringing, with people calling for photos and fans eager to learn more about Frank and Mike. Danielle enjoyed the energy, but it was becoming tough to manage. Mike and Frank were out living their dream, calling her from small towns, excitedly sharing their finds. Mike once found a massive neon sign and couldn't stop raving about it, while Frank found an old fire extinguisher and acted like he'd just won an award. Danielle would laugh, record the calls, and prepare the shop for whatever they brought back. But things weren't as easy as they once were. The show had grown, and with it came new challenges. They filmed 250 days a year, working long hours on the road. Danielle could hear the exhaustion in their voices. They were tired, but they pushed through. Fame, however, affected each of them differently. Mike embraced it, opening a store in Nashville, and everything was thriving, with crowds gathering to meet him. Danielle thought it was fantastic. He was carving out his place in the world. But Frank wasn't as comfortable with the spotlight. He stayed in Illinois, continuing his work in his quiet, unassuming way. Danielle would tease him, saying, "You're the quiet star, huh?" He'd just grunt and change the subject. Danielle saw how well Mike and Frank balanced each other. Mike's loud, Frank's calm. It worked on TV, and she kept everything running smoothly behind the scenes. She also gained her own fan base, with people loving her style, tattoos, funky clothes, and burlesque vibe. She'd post pictures online, and comments like, "You're the best," poured in. Danielle loved it. It made the long days feel worth it. She'd share updates about the shop, and her fans would go wild with excitement. But she also realized that the show had changed. It was no longer just about hunting for antiques. Now there was a full film crew, detailed plans, and a lot of money at stake. What once felt like an adventure now seemed more like a job. The buzz grew, and by 2015, each episode cost $250,000, far more than in the early days. Danielle noticed the pressure mounting on Mike, who wanted every find to be a hit, while Frank just wanted to keep things authentic. The story of Frank, Fritz, and Mike has now been fully revealed by Danielle Colby. What do you think about this truth? Leave a 1 if you support and empathize with Danielle, or a 0 if you see it differently. Share your thoughts in the comments below the video. If you found it interesting, don't forget to like and share so others can learn too. She'd sometimes hear them argue, not about anything big, just little disagreements. Mike would say, "We need a big item," and Frank would respond, "I'm not digging for your show." Danielle stayed out of it, focusing on the shop. She enjoyed being the calm one, the person they could count on. It was a wild journey, and Danielle felt proud of how the show had grown in popularity. Millions of people tuned in each week. Sometimes she'd sit back and marvel at how they went from a small shop in Iowa to being on TV screens everywhere. It was hard to believe. But she knew it couldn't stay perfect, because fame changes fast. It gives you a lot, but it takes just as much. She didn't know what the future held, but she could sense something was coming. For now, she kept the shop running, ready for whatever lay ahead. Problems started to emerge. By 2017, Danielle Colby could feel that something wasn't quite right. American Pickers was still a hit, but behind the scenes, tensions were beginning to build. She didn't join the hunts herself, but she heard everything from Mike and Frank. The show had become massive, with large crews, tight schedules, and a lot of money at stake. Mike was fully invested in making the show bigger. He'd call her from Nashville, excitedly discussing new store ideas and fresh finds. Danielle loved his energy, but she could hear the stress in his voice. Mike wanted every episode to be a huge success with the audience, which meant even more pressure and work for everyone involved. Frank, on the other hand, called less often, and when he did, his voice sounded exhausted. Danielle knew he had been struggling with Crohn's disease, and his stomach pains were getting worse. He didn't say much about it, but she would still ask, "Are you okay?" He'd reply, "Yeah, just tired," then quickly change the subject. Danielle didn't press him, knowing he was a private person, but the film crew had mentioned that Frank had missed several filming days and looked drained. Danielle started to worry, knowing how much Frank loved hunting for antiques, but she could tell his body just couldn't keep up anymore. The shop was still bustling, with customers coming in and asking about Mike and Frank. "Where's Frank been?" they'd inquire. Danielle would smile and say he was out hunting, then quickly change the subject. She didn't want to stir up rumors, but she could see the signs. Frank's calls were getting shorter, while Mike's calls grew more frequent. It felt like the show was starting to pull them further apart. One time, Frank called her during a filming day, upset about something Mike had said. "He's turning this into a circus," he complained. Danielle listened without taking sides. "He's just excited," she replied. Frank grunted and hung up. Danielle didn't tell Mike because she didn't want to get caught in their fight, but it lingered with her. They used to laugh about things like this, but now they were arguing. She started to question if the show was worth it, if it was driving a wedge between them and creating a deep divide. Still, Danielle kept running the shop, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Fans didn't see the struggles behind the scenes. Episodes continued to air, and Mike and Frank were still finding cool things. Danielle knew those scenes were carefully edited to hide the tough moments. She'd watch the show and think, "That's not the whole story." But she didn't say anything. She enjoyed her role, keeping the shop running and staying out of the drama. Mike would occasionally stop by with new ideas and plans, but Frank visited less. Danielle missed the old days when the three of them would sit together, telling stories and laughing. By 2019, it was clear that something major was on the horizon. Frank's health had deteriorated, he'd missed more filming days, and the crew had to scramble to get everything done. Mike was still determined to push the show forward, but Danielle could hear the frustration in his voice. She'd hear him sighing during phone calls whenever Frank was brought up, and she could feel the tension growing. The show had become a machine, and there was no stopping it now. Danielle felt the weight of everything slowly crushing down, problems she couldn't fix. She hoped Mike and Frank would resolve their issues before things escalated. Then, in March 2020, everything came crashing down. Frank Fritz's final episode aired, and shortly after, he disappeared. Danielle Colby found out from Mike. He called her one night, his voice heavy. "Frank is done," he said. She asked why, but Mike didn't offer many details, only telling her he won't be coming back. Danielle didn't press for more answers. She could tell he was upset. She had sensed it coming for a while, but it still hit her hard. Frank had been part of the show from the very beginning. His silly laugh, his love for quirky finds, and now, with the truck rolling on without him, it just didn't feel right. Later, Frank told his son that he hadn't spoken to Mike in 2 years. "My back's been broken," he said, adding that Mike hadn't even reached out. Danielle didn't fully buy that. She had seen Mike adjust the filming schedule when Frank was unwell, but she also understood Frank's feelings. He had been in so much pain, and maybe he needed more than just changes to the schedule. Danielle didn't call Frank to check in because she didn't feel it was her place. She thought if Frank wanted to reach out he would, but he never did. Fans started expressing their anger online, asking, "Why did Frank leave?" and "Did Mike abandon him?" Danielle saw the posts but chose to stay quiet. She focused on running the shop, posting pictures of antiques, anything to avoid addressing the questions. She didn't want to take sides. Mike had always been her friend, but so had Frank, and she hated that he wasn't around anymore. She texted Mike, "How are things?" His reply was simple, "We're making it work." She didn't ask about Frank, feeling it was too sensitive a topic. The truth was messy. Frank's Crohn's disease had worsened, and he'd been hospitalized 17 times in 2 years. In 2020, he was receiving rehab treatment for alcohol issues. Danielle heard about it from the film crew, but she never saw him as a failure. Pain could change someone, turn them into a different person. She remembered when Frank would joke about a new find, how excited he'd get. But now, he wasn't like that anymore. That really saddened her. Mike kept filming and brought in new people, and Danielle watched the episodes. They were still good, but they didn't feel the same. She missed the energy Frank brought, even though he had been difficult lately. Meanwhile, she still had to manage her own chaos with the shop full of customers. Then 2020 changed everything with the pandemic. Danielle did her best to keep the store open when she could, wearing a mask and talking through the glass. Customers continued to ask about Frank. "He's resting," she'd say, keeping it vague. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't have enough of a story to share. Mike posted online saying he would miss Frank and referred to him as his brother. Danielle read it and nodded. Mike truly meant it. But Frank's words still lingered with her. He had told his son he felt like a second-class citizen, like Mike was the star and he was just standing in the background. Danielle understood that feeling. Mike was the face, the big dreamer, while Frank was the regular guy, the one searching for the small treasures that fans loved. She didn't think Mike had intentionally pushed Frank out, but she understood why Frank felt left behind. The show was Mike's baby, and Frank simply couldn't keep up anymore. Danielle wished they had talked things through clearly, but they hadn't. She kept her calm demeanor, accepting that the truck no longer rolled on with Frank. She focused on running the store, on dancing, and on her own life. Fans kept speculating, money, fights, jealousy, but she didn't let it bother her. She knew Mike was hurting, and Frank was too. The breaking point had come, and Danielle realized she couldn't fix everything. All she could do now was wait and see what happened next. She wasn't ready to talk about it at the time, but that moment came later. Danielle Colby's first words finally broke the silence in July 2021, marking a major turning point. She had been avoiding fans and rumors ever since Frank left. People kept asking her online, "What happened to Frank? Pick a side!" She hated that pressure, so she decided to take control. She picked up her phone, took a selfie with Mike, and posted it on Instagram. "Off again with my best friend and big brother, whom I completely support and stand behind," she wrote. Boom, Danielle had made her choice. She picked Mike's side, but she didn't stop there. She had a lot to say about Frank Fritz. She kept writing, and everything became clear. "I'm truly sad about Frank's loss from the show," she said. "I'm so saddened by his struggles. I've witnessed it all over the past decade." Danielle Colby confirmed the rumors, but not through a dramatic fight story. She had seen Frank face countless challenges, likely health issues and other personal struggles, and it hadn't been easy for him. Fans read every word, asking, "What struggles?" Danielle didn't go into details. She wasn't the type to gossip. She simply shared what she knew, keeping it respectful and honest. Then, Danielle dropped a heavy statement. "Frank caused himself a lot of pain that's hard to watch." She went on to write, "I truly hope Frank gets all the help he needs to get healthy after many years of not being well." That statement resonated deeply with people. Danielle wasn't angry. She was concerned. She had watched Frank fade over time, and it broke her heart. She didn't blame him. She didn't judge him. She just hoped he would get better. That's how she put it. Yes, the rumors about the troubles are true, but not in the way you think. She explained the reason for the post. "The only reason I'm talking about this now is because people are speculating about my words," she said. "My words were misinterpreted in tabloids because they couldn't interview me." Danielle was tired of the silly stories circulating around her silence. "This is exactly how I feel," she added. "I hope everyone gets better." She wanted to speak for herself, free from rumors and lies. She was done letting others speak for her. Fans had plenty of opinions. Some appreciated Danielle's honesty, while others urged her to say more. She didn't care. She didn't feel the need to reveal all the details. She had been with Mike and Frank for so many years, through store conversations, calls on the road, and everything in between. She chose to stand by Mike because he always had her back, but she still cared about Frank. Her post wasn't a dramatic revelation, just a glimpse into her thoughts. People could guess the rest, but she said what she wanted to say. Life didn't stop after that. Danielle kept the energy high for the store, and fans continued to come in with questions. She'd smile and say, "Check my post," then move on. Mike kept hunting for antiques, and she still supported him online. Frank stayed silent, and she didn't reach out to him. She had done her part, cleared things up, and made her stance clear. The rumors about conflict were finally put to rest, but things were still complicated. It was Frank's pain and Mike's push. She left it at that, allowing the fans to figure it out for themselves. After Danielle's post in 2021, everything went quiet, but it wasn't easy. Fritz was no longer on American Pickers, and Danielle Colby had to witness the fallout. She didn't say much more online, only posting pictures about the shop and things related to dancing, keeping things light. But behind closed doors, she knew Frank was struggling. His Crohn's disease had been brutal for a long time. She heard he was trying to improve, but the progress wasn't coming quickly. Danielle didn't call him, thinking he needed space. She just hoped he would get through it. Mike kept the show going, and Danielle supported him. He'd occasionally stop by the store, looking tired but still smiling. "We're still picking," he'd say. She nodded, relieved that he was hanging in there. Fans asked about Frank less now, as her post had cleared up some of the rumors, but she still heard whispers from the crew. Frank wasn't doing well. He had been hospitalized multiple times and was facing even more challenges. Danielle felt a deep sadness. She remembered the time Frank brought in a rusty bicycle to the shop, smiling like a child. That person was slowly disappearing. Then, in 2022, things took a turn for the worse. Frank suffered a stroke, a major and frightening one. Danielle heard the news from a friend on the crew. Mike dropped everything to be by his side. She didn't ask for details, but she heard that Mike had been there a lot, sitting by Frank's bed, bringing little things, old photos, and items they had found together. Danielle thought that was wonderful. It showed that Mike still cared, despite the silence between them. She didn't visit, as she wasn't as close to Frank, but she kept track of the situation. Frank wasn't recovering quickly. The stroke was severe, and he needed a lot of help afterward. Then, in October 2024, it all came to an end. Frank passed away. Danielle heard the news from Mike, his voice broken. "He's gone," he said. She didn't know what to say, just listened. Mike told her that he had been with Frank until his final days, bringing items from the times they used to pick together. Danielle felt a lump in her throat. She had known Frank for so long. His habits, the things he'd find. Losing him felt like losing a part of the show. She didn't post anything about it, she just needed a day to think. Fans didn't know the whole story. They saw Frank leave and heard about Danielle's post, but they didn't know what had truly happened. Mike also stayed silent, only posting a short message online about missing Frank as a brother. Danielle respected that. She didn't want to complicate things further, but the rumors started up again. People said Mike had abandoned Frank, that fame had destroyed their friendship. She shook her head. She had seen Mike always there for Frank, watching him fight with his body. It wasn't that simple. Finally, Danielle Colby broke the silence about Frank Fritz and confirmed the rumors. It had been months since Frank passed, and she didn't want to wait any longer. She sat down for an interview, simple, no drama, just her and Frank. Frank's body had worn out, she said. "I've witnessed it happen over many years, the pain from Crohn's disease, everything." Mike didn't push him out. Frank had to stop. She spoke plainly, without embellishments. She confirmed that the rumors weren't about a fight, but about a person who could no longer continue. "It's time to tell the full story," she said, nodding toward the thumbnail. "This is for them." She clarified, Frank loved picking, but his health just wouldn't allow it. She explained that by 2018, he had been in and out of the hospital 17 times in 2 years. Mike had tried to help, adjusting shooting schedules and waiting for Frank, but he simply couldn't keep going. Danielle had witnessed it firsthand, Frank grimacing on calls, Mike stressed with the schedule. Frank didn't quit because he hated the work, she said, but because he physically couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't shocking news, but it was the truth, and fans listened. Then she turned to talk about Mike. "Mike was always there for him," she said. After the stroke, Mike was there, paying hospital bills, bringing old items to the hospital. He was there when Frank passed away. Danielle didn't have to guess. She knew because she had heard from people close to them. Mike didn't talk much about it, she explained, but he didn't have to. He was there. This was how she cleared up the rumors of a fight. Mike wasn't the bad guy. Life itself had torn them apart. She shared a little about herself. "I've known them since the early days," she said. Frank was quiet, picking small items, while Mike was the dreamer, searching for big pieces. They were wonderful together. Danielle smiled as she remembered. Fame had made everything difficult, long days, immense pressure, but it wasn't hatred that drove them apart. It was Frank's body that gave out. She wasn't sad or angry, just telling the truth. Now, the fans had the full picture, and it was a heavy one. People wanted a dramatic story, full of fights and betrayal. But Danielle didn't give them that. "Not much drama here," she said, laughing a little. Frank had struggled with his health, not Mike. Mike had struggled to keep the show going, not Frank. She had hinted at this in 2021, but now everything was out in the open.
"I didn't say much back then," she explained, "because it wasn't the time. Now that Frank is gone, I feel like this is the time." She wasn't there to chase views. She was there to tell the truth. The interview was brief but very impactful. "They built something special," she said. "American Pickers was theirs, 2 friends out picking." The show would go on because of Mike, but Frank's part would always remain in it. Danielle ended without tears or a long speech. She confirmed the rumors with the truth, no embellishment. The fans listened and felt it, no more guessing. She shared the story from years of observing. She ended simply. "That's it," she said. "No big fight, just real life." She was proud of both of them. Danielle left, leaving the story there. Mike would keep picking, Frank was in the past, and she had told everything. No twist, just an ending, and she was content with that. She hoped the fans were too. The full story had been told, and it was hers. So, the story of Frank, Fritz, and Mike was finally shared clearly by Danielle Colby. Hopefully, you now have a full understanding of the struggles behind the show. Thank you for following along, and don't forget to like and share so more people can know.